Energy. It is all around us, both seen and unseen. It affects all the lives within humanity, our great planet Earth, and the entire universe. It is a conscious, cosmic matrix, an ever-evolving cycle, creating, breaking down, and recreating. This is Connected with your host, Andrea Dragonfly. Andrea tells us that energy is the foundation of our human experience, intrinsically affecting every facet of our lives, our perceptions, choices, and actions, as well as the challenges, opportunities, and people we attract. So now, please welcome the host of Connected, Andrea Dragonfly.
Hey there, welcome. Welcome to the show Connected. I am your host, Andrea Dragonfly. We have been working our way through this past several seasons, starting in spring into summer, and now we are into fall full on. And we just had so just bring that to your attention. If you're not already aware of that, then, check out what's going on with you. If you want to put some There's a big shift that's happening planetarily, of course, especially with these eclipse seasons. And we just had our second, so we are finishing out the fall equinox, not equinox, but eclipse seasons. And so we won't have another one until another 6 months from now. But big, powerful energy, endings and beginnings. And so in the sign of Libra. And so I wanted to bring that forward because this is the energy. These are some of the unseen energy forces that we can work with when we become aware of them, conscious of them. And you can go online, you can hit up YouTube and find even your own personal astrology chart, maybe not your chart per se, but your sign, and you can get information about that. And you can also set an intention, putting that forward for yourself as we move into the fall, end of 2024. We also have a huge planetary shift that's happening in November with Pluto returning back into Aquarius, where it'll stay for about 20 years. And that's going to be big shifts within just humanity for a whole. So I wanted to bring that forward because that's definitely happening, and we're right at that beginning of this new beginning. So if you haven't already done something around that, I encourage you to just use this next couple days to put that intention forward for yourself, your greatest, what it is that you would like for yourself, and achievements and direction, creating your destiny, how you want that, life path to go, or you want it to take you. Now, we have been talking about lineage for a period of time. And so last week we talked about lineage curses versus demonic possessions. Coming out of the week before that, looking at lineage wounds. And so as I brought this conversation forward, I wanted to bring this, again, I'm going to do a little bit of a recap about what that is, and then talk about how we're shifting. So I want to talk about that shift right now, as for the first several, I want to say I'm at episode 31. So for the first 30 episodes, the conversation has really been about energy within ourselves, energy about how we experience the world, energy about how we are discerning, or, what truth is for ourselves, right? And then also the energy that we put out into the world and the energy that comes back. So what is that energy that we're connecting to? And so I've talked about karma, I've talked about a lot of different things, but this is really about our own personal experience as to how we are experiencing the world. And now at this point, I want to be shifting and talking more about the unseen energies that are around us, which, even within the conversation last week, bringing forward curses, bringing forward demonic possessions within lineage. These things are real. It doesn't mean that they're common and we're going to see them in every family, because we're not. But it is a conversation that is ready for more and more people to step into to know what is going on in the energy field around us, right? And so, with that, just a quick recap looking at lineage wounds. So, lineage wounds, and just kind of sharing the differences once again. Those lineage wounds are where the individual, the person within the family, has had a traumatic experience. And within that experience, there was a loss of empowerment. And it could be at the hands of another person. It could be at an event, something like war. It could be at a traumatic abuse of some sort, so it can be, you know, rooted in any kind of scenario that really created a deep loss for that individual. And then that loss began to affect those around them. And then even through the energy lines, we have our DNA, our genetics. We don't get it through the genetics, aspect of it, but we get it through the energetic field of our ancestors, of those who've come before us. And so if there is a person who's experiencing disconnection from intimacy, or just being able to really, intimacy is huge. So this is often what I see when I'm working with individuals. And sometimes it can be the masculine line, father to son, to the next generation. It can be along the matrilineal line, but it can also go all different ways. And so that lineage karma can really just show up in many different ways. So, but again, it comes from an experience where there is a disempowerment and often a soul loss that then can be carried through generationally, that different family members are experiencing for the healing. Now, the curse is actually something that's coming from another person. It's usually that person is either a very developed magical person. I'm going to use the word magical. And again, the definition that I love and that has come to me many, many years ago for the definition of magic is that magic is an interaction between two conscious energies. And so we could be one of those conscious energies, and we're working with another conscious energy. And as we go into the evening tonight, we're going to be talking about some of those conscious energies. How do we create relationships with them, right? And of course, I'm going to be talking about creating relationships with good energy, not the ones that are unhelpful and hurtful. But those curse energies can come from somebody who's actually putting some sort of an action into motion that will attach onto the family or can attach onto a lineage. And that action is, that's going to some way disempower the family. It can bring them to poverty. It can bring them to illness. It can bring them to, all sorts of infertility. So it can definitely move along the family lineage, or certainly can just move along with that one person. It's not always lineage, but it can be lineage, right? But again, that's coming from another person who actually more or less places this on another person with ill intent. Again, and these curses can become layered and they can be very complicated. And so, and they are as diverse as we can imagine. There's so many different ways that a curse can work itself out. But again, it comes from another person. And then we have what was called demonic possession within lineage. And I was talking about, well, this is where there's a person within the family lineage that is really seeking power. They're seeking control. They're seeking some sort of domination or success or wealth, in many forms, fame, fortune even, right? And I talked about how it could be somewhat like a negotiating, creating a pact, or, with the devil. Now, I don't want to just say devil because that's a very open-ended, concept. We all have a different idea of what the devil is. But what I really want to get at is that there are these dark forces that a person can make they can make a pact with, conscious or unconscious. Now, consciously, they're like, yes, I want this. And that in that conscious connection, they're willing to take the risks of what the payoff is. And the payoff isn't good. But these energies are tricky, as I had mentioned last week. And so they can be very alluring. They can be very tempting. Can make a person think that, oh, I can have this all with a little bit of this. Okay, that's fine. Like a little bit of the payback on that. But what they don't realize is that the control in which they're hoping to get for themselves really is a false sense of control, and that they then become enslaved more or less to these dense energies, and they lose track of what it was that they really wanted. They still may get the fame, they still may get the power, but then the quality of their life and the family life, the lineage that follows, can be very, very challenged and wrought with all sorts of very conflict and pain and sorrow, and I was talked about murder even, and so there's all sorts of different energies that go along with that. Now I'm going to go ahead and start talking more about these, and it's going to be more in detail, but it's going to take several shows, because what I also want to do is I want to go ahead and kind of go back and forth between what some of these forces are. Where do they come from? How do we interact with them? How do we make a pact with the devil, right? Or a dense energy force? Or how does one just actually come to us and bring that temptation forward? Because it's not like that person, that family member is sitting around saying, okay, where are you? I'm ready to make a deal with you. Because it's not necessarily that either, right? And so what I want to do is I want to be able to build our awareness. Awareness is expanding our consciousness. When we're able to bring this information in, we're then able to understand actually more about what's happening in the world. And I talk about how we don't really know this information. It's not taught to us. And especially whatever your spiritual path is, normally it's not really talked about a whole lot either, even within Christianity. And that, there is certain, stories within the Bible that talk about, Jesus, hanging out with the devil, and the devil tempting him before, in the garden, before, he was to be captured by the Roman guards. And so, but and I believe there's some other place, because I was asking about this. Where does this show up even within like the Bible? Now, of course, they exist, and even in with the Hindu pantheon and all the different gods that are there, we can see the demons at the bottom. We can see that they're around, but they're not often discussed. And I think that sometimes there's this fear. Well, if we talk about it, then we might bring them forward, right? Well, part of this is that we just got to know what's out there. And we got to know that what is out there also is within equal measure of what is good. And we don't always talk about our good allies. Many people just believe in their concept of that greater power of God or whatever each person identifies that with. And so we're starting a journey. We're going to start this journey of the next several shows talking about these different energy allies. I want to definitely really talk about those that are benevolent. And the benevolent allies are those that are helpful. They're kind. They come to us. They come with the intention of helping humanity. They're coming in as a force that says, you're not alone and I'm here with you. And I'm going to walk with you and protect you and all these different things. But we're not always conscious of that, right? And so that's where we're bringing it into our field. And then we have the malevolent energies. And the malevolent energies are on the other side of that. They're going to be more ill-intending. They're going to be more destructive, unhelpful. And so we're going to go ahead and dive in. And of course, over the course of these next several weeks, I'm not sure how long this conversation is going to last, but I'm just trying to get all of that information in to the best of my ability. You're going to get a better sense of, as we talk about this, we're going to connect to those benevolent beings, those protectors that allow us to understand, because there's so much of that happening actually in the world in different ways. And we just don't even acknowledge that, hey, maybe there's these other energies that are playing out as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a quick break. And so do whatever you need to do. And when we get back, we're going to start kind of going in. I'm going to share a little bit about how all of this came into my world, which can kind of create this foundation so that you can start looking at it in your world. So I'll see you back here in 2.
What if there were a super tiny device that could diagnose the brain and is smaller than a single human hair? What if you could see inside the brain to help an epilepsy patient during surgery or to help the fight against Parkinson's disease? Dr. Patricia Broderick is proud to announce the Broderick Probe, a biomedical and electronic breakthrough. Imagine a probe to help with the understanding and potential cure of brain-related diseases. To learn more, listen live to the Easy Sense radio show with host Dr. Broderick, Wednesdays 7 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave Media Network and TuneIn Radio. And to help support the Broderick Foundation, please go to EasySense.com and learn how, with your help, we can fight these horrific brain disorders. That's EasySense.com to learn more and help support the Broderick Foundation. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness, Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them. We discover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals. Listen to John Hawkins' My Strategy, Saturdays, 1 p.m. Eastern on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio.
Welcome back. I want to remind everybody that this is a live show, and that if there is any questions that you have along the way, please, you are welcome to dial that phone number at the top of the screen, or you're even welcome to send a comment. If you're on Facebook and you want to go ahead and send any type of questions, comments, clarifications, all of that is welcome. I also want to say that I have really been in the world of, sometimes I don't even know how to really articulate it, but I've been in the world of spirit for many decades now, so over 30 years. And what I have certainly come to learn is that my language can be confusing. That because I've lived in this kind of alternate world of energy beings, energy consciousness for so long, that for me talking about it, I sometimes forget that people may not know what I'm talking about. And because it's just part of my world, it's part of my everyday, it's what, my breathing, my eating, my sleeping is all very much intertwined in this world and has been. So I do also encourage, again, if there's something about my vocabulary, the words I'm using that are confusing, you are welcome to, in the comments, go ahead and, ask about that. Ask to expand. Can you tell me more about that? What do you mean by that, right? And I'm going to also be very cautious and conscious at the same time to use the vocabulary that is most simple. And I've been trying to do that as much as possible through all of these different shows. However, I do slip. I know that those things happen. People are like, what do you mean by that? And so I want to address that. I just want to make sure that you know that if there is something, again, this is a great place for you to ask questions, okay? I also just wanted to begin by talking about, these energy beings. And so the title of the show is The Unseen, and the benevolent and malevolent beings. Now, first of all, there's many things in the unseen. They're not all beings, or they may not be considered beings in your perspective, right? So again, this is where I'm inviting you to try on these, this conversation. And again, I use the word conversation, even I'm the only one talking. But to try it on and begin to feel it in your own energy field for what are the words that are best for you? Like, how do you identify that, right? And so with these, because the unseen, there's so much to the unseen. The unseen in itself, I mean, we could go so many different connective points, where we're working with unseen energy. I mean, there's unseen energy within our bodies. Even our mind and our thoughts is unseen energy. Our emotions is unseen energy. So of course, those are, a whole different category of unseen energy. But really, what I'm talking about, the unseen energy, just so that you know what it is exactly that I'm talking about, is that I'm going to be talking about allies, the unseen energy allies, and they come in different forms. And these forms are varied. And again, over the next couple of weeks, we're going to be talking about how, where they're coming from, and that oftentimes energy can take on different forms. It can show up in a way for us humans to connect with it, right? And so this is also like animism. This is where we're bringing, even within Egyptianology and the gods, and how there's this idea that, God is in the image and likeness of man, human. And so this is what helps us connect to certain things, because energy isn't in these forms, but they can show up in these forms. Because if that's what's easiest for a person to connect to, relate to, respond to, then that's what that energy force is going to do. But when we recognize that, energy, and so I'm going to go ahead and before I move into really looking at benevolent versus malevolent, again, I want to say that this has been part of my incarnation. I came into the world to have this be my life. And even, 15 years ago, I didn't know that I would be working with kind of the more malevolent energies in the way that I have developed and been guided to do so. It was calling. And it wasn't necessarily a calling, it was more of a choosing. I was chosen to be able to work this. Came into my field. Many different energy workers have their specialties. And over the course of the last decade, for sure, this has become my specialty in a certain way. So I have had innumerable people show up with energy attachments. I started working with understanding, learning how to work with these darker energies, these dense energies. I spoke maybe last show or a couple shows ago about a shaman teacher of mine talking about how shamans act as spirit lawyers and soul negotiators. And so it's about working with these energies that we're working with. When I talk about the soul, and again, the soul is that part of us which is our navigation device. It brings us to the people, the places, the experiences that we need for our wholeness, for our evolution, for our opportunity of growth. And we have, what we can call soul losses. And there's those parts of our empowerment that can get like chipped off through a trauma, through an event. And within that event, an event that event can be even a car accident, falling off a horse, some sort of physical accident. We can have a fear of being, ever going back on that horse again, right? Ever driving in a car, whether it's at night or around a certain intersection where that original accident had taken place. So they can show up in different ways. Trauma can also happen through the many different forms of abuse, physical, sexual. Oh, I think there's something happening with the camera here. But anyway, at least on my side, maybe you didn't see that. But and so we're looking at these different, the different ways. And so when we have these traumas, we get these cracks in our energy field where these energies can come in. And so I've been guided over the last 15 years to be working with different teachers that know about this, that have absolutely working this field. And hey there, I'm not sure. We just had some technical difficulties, not sure what ended up happening there. But thank you for still holding on and checking it out to see what was going to happen next. Sometimes I wonder if it's these energies that are coming in, because they do have an intelligence and they can do certain things like that. So just wanted to say that thanks for holding on and staying with me. And of course that just threw me off track a little bit. So just kind of trying to find my way back to what I was just talking about. I was talking about how I had different teachers, different people that have come to guide me along the way. But again, sometimes we're put on a path. It's the teachers that came into my life that brought this, and then there was this resonant energy that said, oh wow, this I can I feel called, I feel comfortable. And not that by all means, I don't want to say working with dense energy is a very comfortable thing for many people, but there's this part of me that knows that this was something for me, that was what I was here to do, right? Because we all have our gifts. We all have what we come in with, right? And again, I talk about how many different energy healers are going to have their specialties. So in order for us to work with these darker, denser forces, we also have to have an incredible relation with benevolent forces. So I've been building a team. I've been building relationship in many ways with many different energies, these energy beings, for decades. And so that's where this was like, okay, this is my calling. This is part of my calling. Doesn't mean this is the only thing I'm here to do in the world, but it means that this is what I have been gifted with and have been, in a certain sense, chosen to do. And so I wanted to bring that forward because I'm going to be speaking a lot through my experiences. I'm going to be speaking through different wisdom teachers coming from the shamanic indigenous of North America and South America. I'm going to be even working from the shamanic indigenous of Europe as well. I'm going to be also connecting into the Western esoteric wisdom and mystery traditions of Europe as well. And so these are going to be kind of where, my foundation of how I've come to know this, but mostly it's through my own practice, my own meditation, through my dream time, and even like, you know, doing this on an astral plane, which we'll talk about also. What do you mean by an astral plane? Actually, I'm going to talk about it right now. Like that astral plane, when we sleep at night, our physical flesh bodies are laying there in our beds, our etheric bodies, which holds our imprints, it holds our information that we carry karmically through our lifetimes, are attached to that physical body. But our astral body, this is part of that soul body. We can float, we can move through the spiritual realms during our dream time. The dreams are, sometimes hard for us to understand. Sometimes they're very clear for us to understand. But really that is that spiritual part of ourselves. And oftentimes, even when I was first learning 10, 15 years ago, a lot of it was showing up in dream time of how to work this. And it doesn't mean that it wasn't real. We're talking about different worlds within worlds, realities. And I know that for some people that might be, well, what does that mean? Because there's multiple dimensions that we can be working in. And there's multiple dimensions that these beings come from, that come into this earthly plane. And so even in my social media posts, I talk about the lunar realm. And the lunar realm, I just want to clarify, what does that mean? Because the lunar realm literally is the realm between the earth and the moon. And even so, it can even be in the earth to the moon, because there's all sorts of energy beings that live in the earth. And we're going to kind of flush some of those out over the next few weeks to see, like, okay, well, who are they? What are they? What do they do? How do they hinder our growth? How are they helpful to us, right? But that lunar realm is the realm of all of this kind of energy chaos. This is the chaos that we experience just in our everyday mundane lives, even if we're not aware of these beings being part of it, right? So this is the chaos of the world, all of the crazy things that are happening in the world. And that is why these energy beings are so like, ooh, this is opportunity, opportunity, opportunity. I'm going to talk more about that. But I also want to just mention that I'm going to get a little kind of esoteric here, which means, just so I can share what esotericism is, this comes by different names: esoterica, esoteric, which is, it's usually hidden information, lost information, buried information, and it's the Western mystery schools. Back in the day, we're talking thousands of years ago, during the time of Alexandria, we're talking during of ancient Greece, but even prior to that, before the Vedas were written, whatnot, this is where we were connecting inward. We weren't using our external senses. The external senses is what would be called, it's the external senses. But if we're looking at information that we get, there's esoteric, and then there's exoteric. And exoteric means out there. So like the Bible and the different sacred texts, the Quran, they all are exoteric information on those belief systems. And so they've been written out, but they've also been translated through many different languages and whatnot. And so the translations are always going to have, a little bit of a different flux to it. Esoteric is where we take with the information from the outside world and we bring it in. And we bring it in and we work with it, and we begin to work with the consciousness of the cosmos, of these divine beings, to help us understand and more or less discern. Discern is really, being able to make conscious choices, being able to say, is this true? Is this not true? Help me understand, because in the world of the cosmos, it's infinite of possibility and potential, right? And so it's like, oh, wow, well, okay, tell me more, right? So this is how we develop our psychic skills. So we're going to take another quick break. And when we get back, I'm going to jump back into this and begin to these energy beings. So I'll see you back here in 2 minutes.
Did you know that your beliefs create your entire reality, but it's the subconscious beliefs that do most of the creating? Belief shifter and life coach Shiraz can help you identify those limiting beliefs and eliminate them, often in a single session.
Like it was almost instant, like I had relief right away.
Creating better health, relationships, careers, and finances. Let Shiraz help you step out of safety and into awareness.
Definitely something's happening. It's like a flow inside. You know, it feels good.
Whether in person or online, Shiraz provides personal coaching, belief shifting. Visit Shiraz at energeticmagic.com or call 416-529-7429. Energetic Magic on the BBM Global Network, Tuesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern. Find your greater happiness. Be well. Be aware. Be magical.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of the Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on the Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Hey there, welcome back. So I was just talking about esoteric versus exoteric. And again, these are the teachings that that I have been steeped in over the last, couple of decades. And so because this has been my work, my life, of course, I'm going to have my experience. I'm going to say that everybody who does this type of work is going to have their own experiences as well. So this is why it's very important for you to know that many people are going to talk about this subject in different ways, right? Everybody's going to be talking about from how they understand it, from what they've been experiencing or have experienced. And so, why is this conversation important in the first place, especially if you're not, on the trajectory to be an energy healer like myself, right? So why is this important to you? And because when we start to understand how energy is working with humanity, we begin to start to see things that we weren't seeing before. Now, first of all, even working with benevolent energy, and the benevolent energies are those energies that are helpful. Oftentimes people associate the angels, and they are a very powerful, beautiful energy ally, and we can consider those as beings. They're energy beings. And sometimes we can talk about nature spirits, and nature spirits can come from all sorts of different energetics within nature, and these can be benevolent beings. I mean, we can even think about our food. Our food has beneficial nutrients for some of us. Some people, if you've ever looked at your food as eating for your blood type, even. There's a series of books out there that I certainly kind of dove into many years ago, looking at that. There's foods that really can serve us based on our blood type, and there's foods that don't work for us. They make us, lethargic, or they have all sorts of different types of things that can happen. And so they're going to be our allies. Food has a consciousness to it that we don't even know. And then also medicine, herbal medicine, natural medicine. And I'm talking about anything that has life force. Food has life force, right? And so when I talk about nature spirits, and again, this is going to be another show, this is just an intro into some of this, is that we're going to look at how these nature spirits have, live in these different aspects of nature and how they're there to work with us. We just never think about it that way. We're just like oblivious to some of this type of stuff, right? And so, so we have these nature spirits that are all around. We also have different benevolent beings coming from the cosmos, coming from different places. And so they're here to really kind of guide us. We have, and because there's a lot of rich information, and I'm going to be introducing you to things that you may never have thought of before, or it's never ever been a possibility in your thinking before. And so we're going to dive in to some of the, some of these beings that are absolutely here in service for humanity to help evolve us, grow us. And the big thing is that humans are the newest species in the universe, right? In this galaxy. And so everybody wants to kind of come here to check out the human species because there's so many other more advanced, older energy beings. If we're talking about, when did time begin? How did it all begin? Oh, we're the youngest version, that's come in, and we are, everybody wants to know about humans, and there's energies that are here to help us, and there's energies here that want to hinder the human trajectory. They want to keep us in a place of, they want to use our energy for them. They want to use our energy in a way that is manipulative, that is all about that power, control, manipulation, but it's really about oppressiveness. It's about, we don't have free choice, free will, and the freedom, which is what we get with the benevolent, helpful energies. These are the ones that are freeing us and connecting us to divinity, connecting us to the higher consciousness that we've never been taught, before within our current teachings of our regular culture, right? So this is how you have to start to, how do we find this information? How is this information true even, right? And so we have these other energies that are coming from, outside of Earth, coming down to us. And they can also be, there's many different types that are unhelpful. And we can even use I'm going to even bring Star Trek, Star Wars. And I know that for some of you, you'll be like, oh my God, I can't believe you just said that. Or maybe some of you will be like, oh my God, yes, I've been thinking that all along. There's no coincidences. There's no coincidences in life. That there is all sorts of information. And the thing about it is the dominant culture, they absolutely devalue it, they demean it, they poo-poo it, they say, oh, that's airy-fairy, they, whatever the thing is that they're trying to completely make it obsolete so that you stay under control by some other thought form. If you start to recognize that you are connected to these other energies and that there's a whole nother way of viewing the world out there, then you don't give them your power. But if they can take your power from you, they can use you. And there's so many more conversations about this, because it's, and we can even have a whole show on that. I want to bring another person in on that show because there's a lot to that one. There's a lot to that show. And, but it's really going to help us understand why we've been in the dark, why so many of this information has had to go into hiding, had to be buried, and why it's only just been resurfacing over the last several decades, right? And so we're working again with that, the difference between the benevolent and the malevolent. And again, coming back to that question, why is it important to build relationships? Why is it important with benevolent energy? Why is it important to be aware of the malevolent energy? And again, I'm going to repeat myself, because once we start to connect in, we begin to see how it's actually operating within the greater global world throughout all humanity. But the other thing too is we start to recognize that there's something bigger than ourselves. So wherever you are on your journey, and I believe many of you, if you're watching this, you're on some sort of spiritual journey, right? So you already know there's something beyond yourself. But it begins to connect us into what is it that's beyond ourselves, right? And it also, but because I even know people, like I have people close to near and dear to my heart that are atheists, and they don't know what to believe, or they are like, yeah, no, that's not it, or whatever. And so even having these conversations challenges them, right? But it's also about looking at the fact that um, we begin to recognize that there's so much more out there than what our eyes can see and what our senses can perceive. And so we're moving out of that old scientific method that everything can only be true if we can prove it in science and we can see it, right? Because this is where science and spirituality have always kind of butted heads. You can't prove it in science, right? And but when then we get into quantum, and so there's the whole quantum physics, quantum science meets quantum spirituality. And so then everything bends, twists, turns, and we start to see things completely different. And we start to say, oh, wait a minute, there's something here. Because once quantum came into the picture, all of this new sciences of neuroscience and epigenetics and all this other stuff started to float up to the top and saying, yes, we just didn't know, we didn't have the consciousness, we couldn't figure out how to prove these things. And now we're starting to figure out how to prove these things, right? And now also, we're so far through the Industrial Revolution, people moved from natural landscapes where they were living with nature, where they were creating relationships with the nature and nature spirits, because there's spirits that are helpful. There's also nature spirits that are not helpful, right? So we have that dualistic nature in this world. We have that which is helpful, that which is not helpful. There's nature spirits that are helpful. There's also nature spirits that are not helpful, right? And we're going to look at a bunch of those. And so, and again, this is just the intro, bringing this conversation together and why it's important for us to have this. And so again, I'm talking about Star Wars, I'm talking about Star Trek. We can start to look to see that there's no coincidences, that there's these energies, and that we're being given this information, and people have been given this information. Is it just our imagination? Or is our imagination connected to a consciousness that says, hey, these things are existing, and it's now time to bring them forward? No, did George Lucas know that when he was doing that? I don't know. I didn't interview him, but I'm having a feeling like we get these downloads. George Lucas got a download of a whole world that he put into story, picture, film. And it took him time to go from like episodes 4, 5, and 6, which is what he started to, back to 1, 2, and 3, and then onward, right? Because we didn't have the technology at the time. But these are the downloads that we're getting. Where are these downloads coming from? Our imagination is connected to source. We are source beings. Where do you think it's coming from, right? So I'm inviting you to try that on if that is the first time you're being presented with that idea. And so again, going from the Industrial Revolution, we're moving from, the natural spaces into the city. And and we're also losing those relationships, losing those connections. And then we also have the technological revolution, which has only just happened for many of us, in this lifetime, in a certain way, right? Where, holy moly, that things have been, happening so quickly. And now we're at the beginning of AI. We're going to have a nice conversation about that one. We're at the beginning of AI, and we're really in this whole new place that is completely disconnecting us from what is spirit, what is divine. People, even within their religions, We've had numerous different types of religious kind of, even within Catholicism, and you have to please excuse me because it's been a long time since I grew up Catholic, but they had the reform. Like my mom lived during that time where, they had to reform the way that the teachings were because, the nuns were, abusing the students in the school, and they were preaching the fear and not the love. And people were starting to feel like this religion isn't serving me anymore. There has to be something more to this, right? And so even with that, we're in this great awakening. We're becoming aware that things are not what they once were. The world is shifting. The structures are breaking down. New things are emerging. And even with mental health, people are far more isolated and separated than they ever were before. Now we're going to take our last break and we're going to come back and I'm going to finish up looking at why it's important for us to understand these benevolent beings, or both benevolent and malevolent beings. And then again, next week, we're going to dive into the nitty-gritty of some of these. And we're going to start with the benevolent because we want to have a nice foundation, a baseline, so that we can begin to feel safe, right? That's what we want. So we're going to take another quick break, and then we'll finish up after that. So thank you.
What if there were a super tiny device that could diagnose the brain and is smaller than a single human hair? What if you could see inside the brain to help an epilepsy patient during surgery or to help the fight against Parkinson's disease? Dr. Patricia Broderick is proud to announce the Broderick Probe, a biomedical and electronic breakthrough. Imagine a probe to help with the understanding and potential cure of brain-related diseases. To learn more, listen live to the Easy Sense radio show with host Dr. Broderick, Wednesdays 7 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave Media Network and TuneIn Radio. And to help support the Broderick Foundation, please go to EasySense.com and learn how, with your help, we can fight these horrific brain disorders. That's EasySense.com to learn more and help support the Broderick Foundation. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness, Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them. Rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies. Find settings that allow them to be the most productive and track their progress towards accomplishing goals. Listen to John Hawkins' My Strategy, Saturdays, 1 p.m. Eastern on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio.
Welcome back. Thanks for sticking with me. So we're looking again at why. Why is it important? If you're not going to be working with dark energies, why is it important to know about them? If you're not going to be, but it's always important for us to know who our benevolent, our light energies are, so that we can stay connected into the higher vibration, right? So I was talking a little bit about Industrial Revolution. I was talking about the technological revolution, about how religion no longer is really serving many people these days because of the dogma. And that dogma is also like, you need to do it this way. And also, I've had lots of conversations around this recently too. And it's like some religious communities are very much like, you have to practice it this way. And if you don't do it like this, then you are going to go to hell. And so even like I was talking about a certain sect of the evangelical realm. And it's like, they also believe, even if you're Christian, right? And even if you're, and of course I grew up Catholic, but all Catholics, all Protestant, like I guess evangelical is Protestant, but a certain form of it, but it's kind of like that. If you don't follow and do it this way, then you're bad and wrong and you're going to go to hell, even if you're a Christian, even if you do good things, still nonetheless, right? And so for many people, it's like, yeah, no. Is that truly the nature of what divinity has wanted? Is the judgment, right? Also, there's the, the religious wars and the belief systems. Like there's so much about that, the rules, the persecutions that have come through, in the name of religion. And then the exclusions of certain types of people in the name of certain types of religions, the religious wars. I mean, religion has become so off track from what true divinity of unconditional love, compassion, forgiveness really is. I mean, that's the truth of what the Christ came into Jesus for. And we're going to have another conversation about that. But these are the things that are really, waking people up to saying, yeah, there's something else. I need something else. Because otherwise we become isolated, we become alone. Our mental health starts to deteriorate. People have an incredible amount of trauma that they're carrying in their bodies. And within those traumas, this is where these dense energies can come in, where some of these energy beings, and again, I'm going to start to really flesh out each and every one of them to my knowledge. And some of them are going to have names and some of them are not going to have names, but I'm going to be able to give you an idea, right? Because, when it comes to these types of energies, think of the rainforest in, South America, the Amazon, and the diversity is so crazy. And there's new creatures being, formed, in the rainforest, so life is evolving and new species are even coming into existence, so we want to look at energy entities like that too. There's so many different kinds all playing out in different ways, both on the helpful side and the unhelpful side. And so, so even with mental health, people are going to see doctors. They're seeing therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists. They're getting the drugs, the pharmaceuticals for depression, for anxiety, for stress, for whatever it is. I recently went to a high school reunion where I saw some old friends, and one of them said to me, she said, do you know that everybody is see if I can remember what she said, right? More or less that everybody is on some sort of substance, right? Everybody is in this place that they're needing something to cope, to deal. And I'm definitely feeling like she was talking about the pharmaceuticals, and that this is when we're disconnected from our allies, when we're disconnected from all of what is here to support us, we can feel very lonely, we can feel very isolated, we can feel very misunderstood, disconnected, which is what the show is all about, right? And so again, why this is so important is because it connects us. It connects us in a way that we don't need all of that. We don't need the alcohol to cope. We don't need the whatever recreational drugs. We don't need the pharmaceuticals. We don't need the marijuana. We don't need the tobacco. We don't need the whatever it is people are taking, because we're starting to build these relationships in ways that we never thought were possible before. We begin to feel uplifted. We're connected. We're connected into higher energy that we would have never been connected to before, right? But again, when we're in the down, when we're in that lower vibrational energy, this is where we become attacked. And so we need the light beings to help us push off the dark beings. And that's what's going to lead us into the next several shows. So thank you all for being part of this conversation tonight. And again, I know it was going to be an intro. So we're going to get into the nitty gritty. So we're going to start with some benevolent beings next week, and then we'll move to some malevolent beings, and then we'll kind of flip flop around. But I also want to say that if you've enjoyed the show and any of the other shows, go ahead and give it a like. I know that this is the thing, and I'm going to go ahead and invite you to do so. Also, if the show is resonating with you in a way that you think others would resonate, please send it to them as well. I think that we're moving into some really awesome stuff that I would love as many people as possible to be aware of. You can also reach out to me at my website at www.andreadragonfly.com, right? /connected. That's what I was looking for. And then my Facebook and Instagram at connected.dragonfly. So, of course, it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much. Stay connected. Go in peace. I'll see you next week. Take care.
This has been Connected with your host, Andrea Dragonfly. Join Andrea each week on an extraordinary journey, exploring the consciousness of energy and how you are connected. Thursday, 9 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave TV network.